Good morning, Andy. You have learned a lot about the periodic table of the elements. And you also know how atoms look like. Now we want to practice a little bit what the periodic table of elements tells you about how to draw the atom of an element. And as an example, we choose hydrogen. On the left-hand side, you find the information in the periodic table on or about hydrogen. And from this information, which you see here on the screen, you can answer the following questions, like, what is the symbol of the element? How many shells does the atom have? How many valence electrons? How many protons? How many electrons? How many neutrons? How many electrons are in the subshells of which shells, which is called the electron configuration. And after you have answered all these 7 questions, you will be able to draw the atom for hydrogen. So here's a little exercise. In the middle, you see the picture of hydrogen that I took from the periodic table of the elements. And I circle in white 6 different items which you now have to use to get the information you need to draw the hydrogen atoms. So start with number 1, which is the large H, and this is hydrogen. Very simple. So write in field 1, symbol of the element, H for hydrogen. Stop the video while you are working on answering these questions. Here are my answers. You can see that the big H in the middle is number 1, symbol of the element. And it is very interesting to note that you really don't need to know names of hydrogen in different languages like it is printed in this periodic table of the element, because all the chemists in the world use H as the symbol of the element hydrogen, and everybody knows what they're talking about. So symbols are the language of chemistry which one has to learn. Next, we move on to item number 2, and this is the period number. We know that hydrogen is in period number 1. This tells us that hydrogen has only 1 shell. So you would draw only a circle around the nucleus, 1 circle around the nucleus. We call the outermost shell of an atom the valence shell. So that means for hydrogen, the valence shell is also shell 1. Now one question. Your favorite element is sodium, and that is in period 3. How many shells does the sodium atom have? The answer is 3, because sodium is in period 3, and all elements in period 3 have 3 shells. That means you have to draw 3 circles, one larger than the other, for the sodium atom. Hydrogen is in group 1A. This means that it has one electron on the outermost shell, which is the valence shell. And these electrons on the valence shell are called the valence electron. What you have to know is, whenever you see a group number with an A, you take the group number and say this is also the number of valence electrons. For instance, oxygen is in group number 6A. That tells you that oxygen has 6 electrons on the outermost shell. That is 6 valence electrons. Now let us look at the two numbers above the symbol for the element H. The first number is 1. This is called the atomic number Z. And Z gives us the number of protons in the nucleus of the atom. You also know that a neutral atom has exactly the same number of electrons as the number of protons. So Z tells you also how many electrons are in the atom. Now let us look at the number directly above the hydrogen symbol. This is called the mass number, and for hydrogen is 10079. The first thing you have to do is you just round it down to 1.000, or if you find a mass number that is above 0.5, you just round it up. So in this case, we just say A is equals to 1, and A is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So it tells you how many subatomic particles are in the nucleus. We know from the atomic number Z that hydrogen has 1 proton. So A is 1 and P is 1. From this equation, it tells you that N must be 0. So the hydrogen atom has mostly no proton. However, there are a few hydrogen atoms out there that have 1 neutron. So they have 1 proton and 1 neutron. Okay, you know now that the mass number is calculated by adding the number of protons and the number of neutrons. But what is mass? Here is a very nice video on YouTube, the mass versus weight song, and Mr. Edmonds says mass is about how much matter stuff that the object contains. So you look at the object and you see how much stuff there is, and that is the matter. It is now interesting for us to know why do we not include electrons in calculating the mass of an atom. The reason is that the electrons have very little mass in comparison to the proton. You need about 1,800 electrons to get the same mass as a proton. You need also to understand that mass is not the same as weight. Mass does not change whether you are on the Earth or on the Moon. There's always the same number of protons and neutrons in your body. But the force with which your mass is pulled down changes with gravitation. So, and this is called weight. Weight is the force with which the mass is pulled down. And as you know, gravitation is much less on the Moon as on Earth. You have a different weight on the Earth than on the Moon. Finally, we look at the numbers and letters at the bottom of the elements section in the periodic table of the element. For hydrogen, it says 1s1. This is called the electron configuration. And it tells you on which shell and subshells are how many electrons. So the first number is always for the shell. The second, the letter is the subshell, and the raised number gives you the number of electrons in that subshell. On shell 1, in subshell S, is 1 electron. This is the electron configuration for hydrogen. We are finished. One more time, we summarize everything on one page. I suggest you stop the video at this point and look at each line carefully. Maybe you find even a mistake. Here we have all the information from the periodic table of the element about the hydrogen atom summarized in one table. And so the element symbol is H. The number of shells is 1. The number of valence electrons is 1. Number of protons is 1. Number of electrons for a neutral atom is 1. The neutrons is 0, and the electron configuration is 1s1. And here we have it. In the nucleus, we have 1 proton and 0 neutron. We have 1 shell, and we have 1 subshell that we call S, and in this subshell, which is on shell 1, there is 1 electron. This is exactly what 1s1 tells us. This was a lot to digest, and you might watch this video again. And then what we have to do is look at a more complicated element, like for instance your favorite, Andy, number 11, sodium, Na, and look at the information in the periodic table of the element, put together a table very similar to the one above, and then draw the atom of sodium. Good luck!